Kuru-su was an antisocial virgin who was on track to dying alone. However, everything changes when the government forces him to live with a pack of freaky monster baddies who all want a taste of his sausage. It all starts when Kuru-su wakes to find Mia, the monster girl, wrapping him with her giant snake legs. When he protests the assault, Mia explains that since she is cold-blooded, she needs his sausage to warm up. Still, Kuru-su doesn't like the sus position he is in and wants to leave, but Mia strangles him with her snake legs and suffocates his stupid face in her planetary jugs.
It should have been me, not him!
Afterwards, while Kuru-su prepares a hot bath for Mia, she suddenly bursts into the bathroom with her wobble weapons on full display, causing our guy an instant nosebleed. Kuru-su immediately tries to run out of the bathroom, but the thirsty monster girl locks him tight with her tail and demands a second round of action. However, knowing that her weakness is anything cold, Kuru-su douses her with freezing water, causing Mia to recoil immediately, which gives him the window he needs to bolt out of the bathroom. Later that afternoon, Kuru-su gets an uninvited visitation from Sumi-su, his interspecies exchange coordinator, who explains she's here to make sure he isn't doing anything naughty with the monster girl in his care.
Yeah, boy.
She reminds him that the whole point of the program is cultural exchange, and any human who tries to harm a monster girl in their custody will be severely punished. Kuru-su argues that he hasn't tried to hurt Mia in any way, but Sumi-su warns him that trying to pop Mia's cherry also counts as harm. With that said, Sumi-su tries to flirt with Kuru-su, but Mia immediately bursts in and tells her to go get her own cucumber daddy. After Sumi-su leaves, Mia suddenly pins Kuru-su to the floor, stating that she is ready to let him stroke her fat fanny. However, Kuru-su, being an immortal virgin, refuses, and when Mia asks if it's because of the law, Kuru-su screams that it's because she is wrapping him too tightly and his spinal cord is about to snap. A few days later, Mia drags Kuru-su to the lingerie store, where she shows him two different coochie fabrics and then asks for his opinion on which one to buy. Caught off guard, Kuru-su nervously suggests she try both of them, so Mia forces him inside the changing room, where she takes off her Victoria's Secret, revealing her show-stopping honkers. But the useless virgin freezes at the sight and bolts faster than your girl when you're broke. After they exit the store, an ugly couple suddenly spots Kuru-su and Mia and immediately starts running their mouths. This ticks Mia off, so she attacks the couple with her tail, but Kuru-su gets in the way and takes the full hit to the face. Mia panics and quickly rushes to check up on Kuru-su, and he reminds her that it's illegal for interspecies to hurt each other. Soon enough, the commotion draws a crowd of passers-by who start taking pictures of Mia like she's an exhibit, which embarrasses her, so Kuru-su takes her to a hotel where they can have some privacy. Inside the hotel room, Mia takes off her clothes, ready to ride Kuru-su's sausage train.
Yeah, boy.
But just then, the door explodes as Sumi-su and her entire squad of interspecies security bomb their way inside, announcing they received an anonymous tip that some dude was drilling a female monster in the room. However, after seeing that it's Kuru-su and Mia, she tells them to go home. On their way back, they run into the same horror-looking couple from earlier, who start running their mouths again. However, this time, Kuru-su has had enough of the bozos, so he smashes the buffoon's face in, sending him and his man-looking baby mama crashing into the wall. Later that night, as they arrive home, Mia asks Kuru-su why he defended her, and Kuru-su explains that he cannot let anyone be mean to a girl on his watch. Hearing this makes Mia excited, so she jumps on his rod, happy that he sees her as a girl and not some monster. The following morning, while Kuru-su and Mia are doing laundry together, Kuru-su suddenly gets snatched away by a harpy while Mia watches helplessly, unable to do anything. A few minutes later, when Kuru-su regains consciousness, he finds himself dangling from a tree branch, while the bird girl will not stop calling him her Papy, and it takes a while for him to finally understand that the bird girl is trying to tell him that her name is Papy. Confused, Kuru-su asks where her host family is, but the crazy bird girl ignores his question and is more interested in getting ice cream for herself, so she yanks Kuru-su down from the tree branch and then drags him to get one. Over ice cream, Papy casually explains that she is used to running away from her host family, and that her interspecies coordinator has already warned her that one more escape would get her deported. However, as they keep talking, Papy suddenly drops her ice cream and immediately bursts into tears over losing her beloved treat. So, to help, Kuru-su gives her his own, and she happily starts throating it like an expert. This OnlyFans scene immediately attracts the attention of goon-loving degenerates, which embarrasses Kurusu, so he quickly yanks his candy stick out of her mouth. Upon seeing that she has his sticky cream all over her face,
What do you mean by that?
Kurusu suggests she go clean up, but he is shocked when the brain-dead girl strips to her barest in public and starts washing her body in the nearest fountain. After she drags Kurusu into the fountain to wash up with her, Mia suddenly shows up and goes absolutely nuts with jealousy at the sight of her man soaking wet in a fountain with another monster chick. As both girls start fighting over Kurusu's small pickle, they suddenly notice the crowd around them is not watching the fight, but is instead fixated on a little girl stuck up a tree. Papy, desperate to play the hero, immediately tries to fly to her rescue, but when her flat cheeks crash to the ground due to her wet wings, Mia, not to be outshined, coils her way up the tree. However, when she gets to where the little girl is, Mia only ends up scaring the heck out of the girl with her cold-blooded snake face, causing the girl to slip and fall, but Papy swoops in at the last second, catching the girl just before she cements herself to the pavement. A few minutes later, a cop arrives at the scene for a rescue mission, but Kurusu tells the tardy loser he's too late, explaining that Papy had already saved the little girl. After the cop thanks them for saving the girl, he clocks that Papy is part of the human-monster exchange program and demands to know where her host family is. Papy starts stuttering nervously, and Kurusu, knowing the bird girl might get deported if she doesn't have a family, immediately claims to be her host family. However, his genius plan backfires when the cop demands to see his ownership papers, and as Kurusu starts crashing out, Sumisu suddenly pops up from nowhere and shows the cop Papy's ownership card. Later that evening, at home, Kurusu asks Sumisu how she had Papy's papers on her so fast, and Sumisu explains she already had them ready. She adds that as Papy's coordinator, she couldn't find any host family willing to take on a repeat runaway like Papy, so her plan from the very beginning was to maneuver the situation until Kurusu had no choice but to take her in. Kurusu immediately tries to protest against the bird brain girl moving into his already crowded crib, but realizing it's of no use, he agrees, which makes Mia jealous. Very early the next morning, Kurusu opens the fridge looking for a snack, but seeing that the monster girls have ravaged all the food in the fridge, he heads to the supermarket to restock on groceries. However, on his way back to the house, Kurusu suddenly gets smacked hard by a busty centaur who boldly introduces herself as Saria and then demands to know if Kurusu is her master.
It is I.
But Kurusu is already knocked out cold. Later, when Sumisu hears about Kurusu's encounter with the mommy milker, she informs him through the phone that centaurs have an awkward tradition of finding their own masters, and then pleads with him to take care of the monster girl while she naps. When the call ends, Saria explains that according to Japanese tradition, when a person charges into someone at an intersection, that person will automatically become their soulmate. She claims it's an ancient tradition, but Kurusu immediately refuses to be her soulmate, and while they argue, a thief on a bike snatches a woman's bag and speeds off down the street. Determined not to let the useless thief escape, Saria pulls out her sword and vows to capture him, but since the interspecies agreement law prohibits her from harming a human, she says she would need the help of her human master. Before Kurusu can remind her he is not her master, she grabs his hand and forces him to ride her. As they chase after the scooter thief, the ride gets so bumpy that Kurusu has to grab onto Saria's fat melons to avoid getting launched off her back. However, even after they catch up to the thief, Saria starts losing her composure as the excitement of having her fun bags manhandled overwhelms her entire nervous system, causing her to drop her sword and crash into a wall. The thief, seizing the opportunity, picks up the sword, furious that they chased him 4 blocks over a wallet, so he swings the blade at Saria, but Kurusu, being a useless simp, steps directly into the slash and takes the hit himself to protect Saria. Later that day, at home, Kurusu survives, but not without a few injuries to his chest, and while on a call with Sumisu, he narrates how the thief incident happened and how Saria wanted to be a hero so badly. Sumisu listens patiently, but when he mentions the part where he rode Saria like a horse, Sumisu informs him that, according to the Centaur commandment, only the one chosen as their master is allowed to ride them. Kurusu is shocked to hear this, so the instant Saria walks through the door, he gets on all fours and frantically apologizes for riding her. However, with her eyes already smitten with love, Saria thanks him for saving her life and then declares that she has met the man destined to be her master, so she will acknowledge him as her master from now on. The next morning, Kurusu enters the bathroom to bathe, only to find Saria already inside with no silky covers,
Yeah, boy.
which embarrasses her, and without thinking, she knocks Kurusu out with her hoof. Moments later, when Kurusu regains consciousness, Saria apologizes for playing his head like a soccer ball, but Kurusu, being the pushover that he is, waves it off and tells her it's fine. However, just watching them talk like a couple makes Mia lose her mind with jealousy, so she immediately steps in between them, which leads to her and Saria fighting like bitter rivals. In the meantime, Kurusu sets up the bath for Papy, but when she starts stripping in front of him, Kurusu immediately stops her and then gives her a swimsuit that Su got for her. When Papy complains that she can't put on the swimsuit because of her feathers, Kurusu helps her put it on while struggling to control the surge of blood rushing into his baby carrier.
It should have been me, not him!
Once he is done, Papy excitedly pushes him into the water, insisting she wants to feel his sausage on her buns. However, Kurusu strongly refuses to do anything freaky with her because of how flat she is, which frustrates Papy so badly that she puffs up her feathers and threatens to use force. Before she can, she gets attacked and pinned to the wall by arrows shot by Saria, who firmly declares that she will never allow anyone to milk her master. She then suggests Kurusu climb her back, and as Kurusu reluctantly obeys, she charges out of the house at full speed, knocking down Mia in the process. She rides Kurusu to the park, where she once again fiercely affirms her allegiance to him as a dignified Centaur warrior whose loyalty is only to her master. However, seeing how far Saria is taking this whole master thingy, Kurusu immediately tells her to chill, explaining that, in Japan, no one gives a flying frog about her Centaur culture. He advises her to take advantage of the cultural exchange to learn more about humans, and then asks if there is anything she would want to do other than behave like a medieval freak. That's when Saria notices a lovey-dovey couple holding hands, so she shyly admits that she would like to hold his hand, explaining that since birth, her hand has only ever held a sword, so she hopes she can get a feel for what a man's hand feels like. Before she can finish her explanation, Kurusu takes her hand, and for a moment, the whole park goes quiet as Saria feels the warmth of his hand travel all the way down to her creamy ocean.
What do you mean by that?
As she starts to blush like a hormonal teenager, Kurusu, confused, tries to understand what is medically happening to her face, but just then, Mia and Papy crash into the scene, ruining the mood. However, to protect her master from the thirsty feral beast girls, Saria immediately buries Kurusu's disgusting face in her bloated dunkers, which almost makes Mia die of jealousy. So, she snatches Kurusu's face from Saria and smothers it in her plot balls.
It should have been me, not him!
As both girls start to pass Kurusu's head around like a softball, Su, who happens to be driving past the park, spots them on the verge of unleashing their bestiality, so she pulls out her tranquilizer gun to stop the monster girls from ripping Kurusu apart, but as she fires, Kurusu lurches in front of the dart to protect the girls and gets shot in the process. After he faints, he later wakes to find himself back in his apartment, where the girls, feeling guilty for their actions, apologize and promise that from now on they will keep their freaky urges in check. However, to their shock, Kurusu isn't the least offended, as he explains that learning to overcome their naughty impulses is also a part of the homestay. When he mentions that they are now family, Su immediately announces that a recent amendment to the interspecies exchange bill has just passed, and that this new amendment permits humans and monsters to legally marry. She adds that the government has selected Kurusu as the test case study for how this marriage arrangement will function in practice, meaning that within a few months, he will be required to marry either Mia, Papy, or Saria. Kurusu immediately protests the absurdity, but Su tells him that marriage is now an unavoidable part of an interspecies relationship. Later that night, after Su leaves, Kurusu tries to sleep, but he is still disturbed by the whole human-monster marriage arrangement. Suddenly, he hears a knock on his door, and it's Mia, who says she noticed he seems stressed about the whole marriage situation and that she is here to help him cool off. She then pins Kurusu to the bed and starts using her tongue on him better than any girl on the black and orange hub, which makes Kurusu explode in his pants. However, before things get X-rated, Papy suddenly makes a Batman entrance inside and demands to get her share of the action. At that moment, Kurusu notices that the girls are acting more unhinged than usual, like they have been inhaling white powder. Just then, Saria bursts in through the door, explaining that the reason Mia and Papy are acting so extra hyped is because that night is a full moon, so their instincts are fully awakened. She adds that the whole marriage thing only made it worse, causing the girls to completely lose control. Curious, Kurusu asks if her own brain is intact, and at first, Saria claims to be in good condition, boasting that, as a dignified Centaur warrior, a mere full moon could never affect someone like her. However, after saying that, she suddenly grabs Kurusu's hand and starts roughly massaging her humongous melons with it. Fearing they've all lost their dang minds, Kurusu escapes for his dear life and runs into the kitchen, where he immediately calls Sumisu to report the madness going on. When Sumisu asks if he has made a decision yet about which girl he is going to marry, Kurusu goes silent, making her understand that Kurusu is too much of a sad, lonely virgin to make a choice, so she advises him to discuss his plans with the girls, explaining that his indecision is why the girls are acting uneasy. Suddenly, the line breaks, and Kurusu is unable to hear Sumisu, but just then, the girls burst into the kitchen and tackle him hard to the ground. They soon notice a red liquid all over Kurusu, which they fear is blood, so they immediately release him in a panic. But as Kurusu stands up from the floor, they realize it's just ketchup. However, the fear of losing Kurusu eventually sobers them up until the next morning when Kurusu wakes them up and they freeze in shock to see the guy all bandaged up, since they can't remember the freakiness that happened the night before. However, Kurusu claims he is fine and then apologizes for making them uneasy with his indecision concerning the marriage. However, now he says he has made up his mind, and his decision is that he will date all three of them simultaneously as potential marriage partners. Later that night, Mia and Saria are freaking out, unable to control their emotions about Kurusu wanting to start dating them, while Papy, on the other hand, is only interested in playing. Not long after, Kurusu finishes making dinner, so he calls everyone to the table, but Mia immediately sneaks into the kitchen to check what Kurusu made for dinner, and the moment she opens the pot lid, a blue slime launches itself directly out of the pot and attacks her face. As a result, she falls ill, which makes Kurusu worried about where the infectious slime came from, to which Saria explains that slimes are a rare type of monster that even human society has been unable to understand for years. However, she pulls out her sword and assures Kurusu that, as her master, she will protect him from any slime that might want to hurt him. Just as she makes this declaration, the slime suddenly pops out of nowhere, and as Saria tries to slash it down with her Temu sword, the blade bounces back, shocking her and giving the slime the opportunity to attack them. Some minutes later, Kurusu retreats to the bathroom to wash the disgusting slime juice off his body, but while he is doing this, Saria suddenly joins him in the bathroom, armed with her plot cannons. Kurusu panics and asks what she wants, and Saria shyly explains that the slime might attack again, so she simply cannot leave her master unprotected. When she tries to move closer to him, she slips on a patch of slime juice on the floor and, like every goon anime, crashes her balloons on Kurusu's face. After they recover, Kurusu, feeling guilty that she got dirty trying to protect him, offers to help wash the slime off her rump, but as he gently strokes it clean, Saria feels a nice tingling down there and starts squirming. She then begs him to stop before she bursts everywhere, explaining that her rump is her most sensitive area. Once they both wash the slime fluid off their bodies, Kurusu starts wondering out loud why the slime keeps attacking them, and Saria theorizes that it is probably just searching for water. While they talk, the slime drops from the ceiling and attacks again, and as Saria swings to defend her master, she accidentally smacks Kurusu in his jingleberries, causing him to scream in pain. The sound of his scream makes Saria freak out so badly that she loses her footing, hits the floor, and passes out completely, while Kurusu ends up trapped by the slime. Scared for his life, Kurusu panics and begs not to be eaten, but suddenly, before his very eyes, the shapeless gooey blob transforms into a Latina mommy, leaving Kurusu in a state of total shock. While he stares at her in disbelief, the slime baddie pins him to the floor and starts suffocating him with her watery floaties. After that, she picks up the bathroom brush and starts scrubbing Kurusu's body without saying a single word, just the same way he scrubbed Saria's rump. That's when Kurusu finally realizes that the crazy slime girl is practically trying to copy everything he and the girls had been doing the entire time. He wonders if this is her own way of trying to communicate with them or something, but before he can finish this train of thought, she shoves her airbags into his face and cuts off his air supply again. Kurusu figures that if this assault continues, he might actually die, so to save his life, he plunges both himself and the slime mommy into the bathwater and eventually frees himself from her clutches. Later that night, Mia and Saria are impressed with Kurusu when they hear that he managed to defeat the slime by diluting it in water, but Kurusu immediately shuts it down, pointing out that diluting a slime in water could just as easily have caused her to absorb it all and turn into a building-sized monster. However, What none of them notice while having the conversation is that the very slime girl they are gossiping about is standing directly behind them, playing with Papy. When Saria suggests they report the slime issue to Sumi-Su, Kuuru-Su shuts down the idea, knowing it would only end with another permanent resident for his already overcrowded crib. Mia and Saria are immediately against the slime girl staying in the house with them because of her disgusting fluid. But Papy, who is now friends with the slime girl and has even given her a name, Shu, is totally in support of her staying in the house. After they decide to cover up Shu with a raincoat, Mia and Saria pull Kuuru-Su aside to express their worries about keeping Shu in the house. Since Shu didn't come through the proper channel, Saria suspects Shu might be an illegal immigrant and then suggests that Kuuru-Su hand her over to Sumi-Su. However, she points out that doing this might mean Shu will probably be put under probationary supervision or face imprisonment. But while they talk, Papy overhears them, and, thinking they plan to send her best friend to prison, she immediately snatches Shu and flies her out of the house to escape. Kuuru-Su immediately chases after them, and after running for hours, he finally catches up to them. When he demands to know why Papy ran away with Shu even after knowing it's prohibited for a monster girl to leave the house without her host, Papy snaps, saying she will never allow them to arrest Shu because she has done nothing wrong. While they talk, a bunch of nosy brats interrupts them, and as they start pestering Papy to come play with them, Kuuru-Su realizes that Papy has been sneaking out of the house on a regular basis to hang out with these brats. As Papy joins them to play, she hugs the boys with her melons, making Kuuru-Su realize that the only reason the silly little degenerates like Papy is because of the freaky things they enjoy. Soon enough, Shu also joins them to play, but not before sucking in enough water to increase her bust size, giving the Gooner brats an instant nosebleed. This makes Kuuru-Su realize that anytime Shu absorbs water, she gets bigger, but he still can't get Saria's suggestion of reporting the situation to Sumi-Su out of his mind. While the brats are busy playing with Papy and Shu, a speeding truck driven by the same ugly couple from the hotel incident almost isekais a girl, but luckily, Shu saves the girl by absorbing the impact of the truck. However, the impact causes the bridge to collapse, and Shu goes over the edge with it while Papy dives after her and grabs her hand. At that crucial moment, Shu finally utters her first word, which is thanking Papy for all she has done for her. Unable to save Shu, Papy eventually lets go of her hand, but luckily, Kuuru-Su is already there to catch her with a truck. After saying goodbye to the brats, Kuuru-Su finally decides to let Shu stay in his crib, so he convinces Mia and Saria that reporting Shu isn't the best option since she hasn't done anything wrong. However, as they head back home, he warns that they have to make sure Sumi-Su doesn't find out about Shu staying in the house. Unfortunately, when they finally get home, they find Sumi-Su already there, leaving them in shock. The next day, Mia calls an emergency meeting to figure out their next steps now that the government officially knows about Shu's existence. While the meeting is ongoing, a squad of dudes from the interspecies exchange team comes crashing through the front door and immediately starts tearing the house apart, leaving Kuuru-Su utterly confused. Before he can ask what the heck is going on, the guy in charge shoves a document in his face, revealing that they are in the process of building an additional room in the house for Shu, surprising Kuuru-Su. Meanwhile, the girls escape with Shu, convinced that the interspecies security squad is there to bundle her off to prison. While they are strategizing on what to do next, they realize that they didn't escape with Kuuru-Su, which sends them into a state of panic. But they quickly hide in a bush when they spot some men in black and assume the Agent Smith ripoffs must be searching for them. Suddenly, Shu gets dehydrated, and since there isn't any water source around, she unleashes her 50 Shades of Grey skills and starts sucking water from every hole she can find in Papy. Around the same time, Kuuru-Su leaves the house, and while searching everywhere for the girl's whereabouts, he suddenly hears a female scream that stops him dead in his tracks. It turns out a pink-haired hottie has lost control of her wheelchair and is rocketing down the road. She is almost on the verge of slamming into a pole when Kuuru-Su decides to save her like Spider-Man, but at the cost of getting his head crushed in her bazookas. When the girl notices he is bleeding, she panics and suggests they call an ambulance, but as usual, Kuuru-Su claims he is fine. As he pushes her to a safe location, the girl thanks him for being her knight in shining armor, and then introduces herself as Meiro. After Kuuru-Su also introduces himself, he asks to take his leave, explaining that he is looking for some non-human girls, but Meiro surprisingly says she spotted some monster girls earlier and agrees to take him there. In the bush, after draining Papy of her creamy water, Shu, still greedy for more water, decides to aim higher. This time, she dives into Suria's plotful rump, causing Surya to sing the Song of Angels, but Mia clamps her hand over Surya's mouth to prevent her from revealing their location. Then Shu goes to Surya's milk factory, where she sucks mercilessly, giving Surya a premium Cloud 9 experience. Meanwhile, Kurusu and Mero arrive at the bush where the girls are, just in time to witness Shu dealing with Mia. After conquering the girls, Shu decides to try her luck with Mero, but as she launches herself at her, Kurusu acts fast to trap the menace in a sack. When they all get home later that night, they discover that the house has been renovated with a pool for the girls to play in, and the girls are also relieved to find out that the interspecies cops never intended to arrest Shu. To confirm this, Sumi Su suddenly shows up and assures them that she will keep a blind eye to Shu's presence in the house. However, she also mentions that the renovation is not only for Shu, but also for the new monster girl who will be joining them. Suddenly, Mero rolls through the door in her wheelchair, and Kurusu's jaw drops when he sees that the pink-haired girl he rescued is the new monster girl. After Sumisu runs the introductions, Mero reveals her mermaid tail to show that she isn't human, as Kurusu had initially thought. The rest of the girls are cool with having Mero in the house, but Mia's blood boils with jealousy as she immediately starts seeing Mero as a bitter rival. This extreme jealousy leads to her destroying Mero's wheelchair, but this only makes matters worse, because now Kurusu is forced to carry the mermaid girl like a Disney princess, which makes Mia lose her mind. While she spirals emotionally, she overhears Mero asking Kurusu if he has a girlfriend, and as Kurusu fumbles to give an answer, Mero almost slips from his hands. But he catches her and ends up with her Victoria's Secret in his hand. At this point, Mia can't stand it anymore, so she confronts Kurusu for behaving like a miserable simp. However, Mero explains that it isn't Kurusu's fault that she slipped from his hands, but simply because mermaid bodies are covered in mucus, which makes them difficult to hold. Hearing this makes Mia concludes that Mero is working with a much stronger game plan than hers to win over Kurusu, so she immediately drags Su away and has her cover her body with slime juice. Afterwards, she shows up dripping with slime and asks Kurusu to carry her the same way he is carrying Mero, but Kurusu turns her down and tells her to go take a bath instead. Pissed off by Kurusu's continued neglect, Mia decides to gang up with the rest of the girls against Mero, and they agree to help her. A few minutes later, Surya confronts Mero, demanding to know why she is so invested in learning about Kurusu's love life, to which Mero explains that all she wants is to experience the romance from the Little Mermaid fairy tale. The story is about a mermaid who starts simping for a human prince, so she trades her voice in order to become human. However, in the end, the mermaid gets heartbroken after the prince dumps her to chase after Zendaya's waist, leaving her with no voice, no legs, and no man. It's a sad love story, but Mero claims it's one that every mermaid adores and wants to experience. Still, Mia suddenly pops out and declares that she will never let her take away her man, but Mero calmly assures her that snatching her man away isn't her intention. After this heated conversation, Surya immediately tells Mia to give up on her desperation, but Mia admits that, like Mero, she also loves a fairy tale. She reveals that ever since she was a little girl, she had always wanted a fairy tale ending where the prince saves the princess, and they live happily ever after. She admits that she also wants to be carried like a princess, and just watching Kurusu carry Mero makes her mad. Not long after, Kurusu and Mero are at the pool having a casual conversation when suddenly Mia shows up wearing a swimsuit, hoping to seduce Kurusu and capture his attention again. However, her plan dies the moment Surya shows up with her show-stopping honkers, leaving everyone in shock. This makes Mia suddenly lose her footing and falls into the pool, but Kurusu saves her before she drowns. After she regains consciousness, Mero, who has been worried sick about her, hugs her in relief, and Mia is surprised that she cares that much about her. This sparks a friendship bond between them, and later that night, as they take a warm bath together, Mia apologizes to Mero for being so mean to her since she entered the house. She admits that she had been jealous, but then firmly declares that she will still never let her marry Kurusu. However, Mero tells her that her intention was never to marry Kurusu, but simply to experience a romance like The Little Mermaid and then dump him. Days later, Mia insists on cooking but almost burns down the entire house. Kurusu panics and then offers to help, but Mia refuses his help, explaining that she needs to train harder than the other girls in order to become his bride. Suddenly, her hormones spike for a moment, which causes her to burn both the food and her hand in the process, and out of embarrassment, she locks herself in her room. Kurusu then tries to comfort her, pointing out that everyone makes cooking mistakes at first, but when he casually looks at the floor in front of her room, he spots a patch of dead scaly skin. As he tries to figure out what the dead skin could be, Mia suddenly crashes through her door to prevent him from seeing it, and that's when he realizes that Mia is currently in the process of shedding her skin. Feeling embarrassed, Mia confesses that the last thing she wanted was for him to see her like this, and then admits that she has been struggling to deal with the shedding properly, but cannot figure out why it keeps going wrong. After thinking about it, Kuru-Su tells her that the reason she can't shed properly is due to a condition known as imperfect shedding, which is caused by the stress of living in a new environment. Mia is genuinely shocked to find out that Kuru-Su has been hitting the books on Lamia biology, and Kuru-Su admits that he has been studying up on her species. He then offers to help her shed properly, and in exchange he wants her to gag on his candy stick, to which Mia shyly agrees. Kuru-Su then gets to work ripping off the dead skin on her body, but this only makes Mia mourny. When he finally works his way down to the tip of her tail, which is the most sensitive part of her body, Mia squirms and whips her tail around his head on pure instinct, giving him a near-death experience. After finally helping Mia shed her dead skin, she decides to repay him immediately by cooking, and presents him with a disgusting dish that nearly sends him to the Phantom Zone. Later that day, as the rest of the girls return from the park, Kuru-Su decides to head out shopping, but Papy drops a bombshell by announcing that she thinks she is about to lay an egg. Mia, trying to process the information, asks if Papy lays eggs like a chicken, and Papy immediately goes full defensive mode, explaining that it has been a very long time since she last laid an egg and that this would be her first time since arriving in Japan. While the egg conversation is ongoing, they suddenly hear the doorbell ring. When Kuru-Su opens the door, he finds an ugly creep standing on his porch with a camera who introduces himself as Ka-Segi and claims to be a famous YouTuber. He explains that he is currently filming a documentary on interspecies exchange and would like to conduct an interview. Kuru-Su reluctantly agrees to let the creep in, but he immediately starts regretting that decision when he finds the dude's behavior really suspicious. Just then, Ka-Segi announces that he would like to film the girls in their individual rooms as part of the documentary, which shocks everyone, and with no choice, he is taken to Mère-Rose's room first. After recording Mère-Rose swimming in her pool, the degenerate loser then asks to see the color of her pants. When Mère-Rose refuses to give him that pleasure, he quickly records her exposed milkers during a slight moment of distraction, which embarrasses her. Next is Suria's room, and as they get to her room, Ka-Segi asks to see her cooch fabric, but she bluntly refuses. When the freak starts gooning her airbags in 4K, Suria pulls out her sword and threatens to cut off his tiny willy if he doesn't stop. Frightened by her threat, Ka-Segi leaves for Mia's room, where he repeats the same silly question to get a sneak peek of her plots, but as Mia angrily yells at him, Ka-Segi notices the sack of her dead skin sitting casually in the corner of her room and completely loses his mind. He starts yapping uncontrollably like a mindless freak about the economic importance of snake skin in modern society, and then asks Mia directly if he can have it. When Mia refuses to hand a piece of her body to the nut job, he switches tactics and starts reasoning with her, whispering that releasing her dead skin to the public would significantly increase her chances of marrying Kuru-Su. This sweet promise is enough to convince Mia, and she is just about to hand the sack over when they hear a scream from Papy's room, and as they all rush in, they realize she is in labor to deliver the egg. Ka-Segi immediately takes advantage of the opportunity to get steamy content of Papy's plot, while Kuru-Su massages Papy's floodgate region to help her deliver safely. While recording footage of this, Ka-Segi's twisted mind starts rambling about all the nasty things he plans to do with the content he has gathered so far. However, the big-headed moron is clueless that while he is running his internal monologue, Shu's tentacle is stuck to his fat skull, and she is reading out his cultured thoughts aloud for everyone to hear. This revelation enrages the girls, but as they pull out weapons to beat the Japanese Epstein, he snatches the bag containing Mia's dead skin, and then brags that they can't lay a finger on him since the law prohibits non-human species from hurting humans. To create a distraction, Kuru-Su shows Ka-Segi an egg, which he claims is the egg Papy just delivered. As he lobs the egg into the air, Ka-Segi frantically rushes to catch it, claiming the egg is worth $3 million, but before he can grab it, Kuru-Su punches his ugly face and then tells him to get his eyes checked. The girls are impressed by Kuru-Su's sudden display of masculine aura, but when Mia points out that Kuru-Su just broke Papy's egg while aura farming, Kuru-Su clarifies that the egg isn't Papy's, but just an ordinary egg he purchased from the supermarket. As if to confirm this, Papy chooses that exact moment to finally deliver the actual egg everyone has been waiting for. The next morning, Su-Mi-Su arrives to check on Papy's situation, and while she is there, She also mentions to Kurusu that Kasagi is not a YouTuber but a known creepy offender whom she is currently investigating. Meanwhile, in a shabby apartment, Kasagi is furious with Kurusu for ruining his plan to get a hold of Papy's egg and for also losing the naughty footage of the monster girls he had gathered. While he is deep in this spiral, Arachne, the spider monster girl living with him, interrupts him. This annoys him, so he starts yelling at her, but Arachne traps him in her web to shut him up. Arachne then mocks him for being a lazy dump who fumbled $3 million, and with a sinister expression on her face, she declares her interest in finding the Chad who beat him up. Several weeks later, a bookstore gets jacked by a notorious gang of fat orcs, calling themselves the Orc Pioneers, and the customers are taken hostage. When the police arrive and the chief gets on the phone to ask what they want, the orc leader announces that their demand is simple. They want all mainstream ecchi manga rebranded under the name of the Orc Pioneers, effective immediately. Upon hearing this ridiculous demand, the police chief practically loses his brain cells, but then a female officer steps up and reminds him that since the criminals are non-human species, according to the Interspecies Exchange Bill, the police are not allowed to touch them. This pisses off the police chief, who can't believe that they can't even arrest criminals anymore because a law is protecting them. However, when all hope seems to be lost, Sumisu offers to resolve the hostage situation with her team. Back at the bookstore, the orc leader's keen sense of smell picks up an intruder on the roof, and as he opens fire immediately, a monster girl, a member of Sumisu's team, drops to the floor pretending to be injured. She lets herself be captured by the orcs, and without wasting time, the leader pops bullet holes into her bustful melons. Outside, the police chief swallows what remains of his pride and approaches Sumisu to formally request her assistance, but Sumisu simply assures him that her plan is already underway. Inside the store, the orcs also flush out a girl hiding in the corner, and when she makes a desperate run for the front glass door, the orc leader catches her before she gets there. He then grabs her buns and announces to the room that he is going to make an example of her for everyone present to witness. Just then, from a distance, Manako, a one-eyed monster sniper and member of Sumisu's team, starts putting rounds through the bookstore windows with surgical precision, destroying every firearm in the orcs' hands before any of them can process where the shots are coming from. These Mission Impossible shots terrify the orc leader, as he fears only a professional could aim so accurately from outside the 1-kilometer range of his smell. As the orcs start to panic, a giant robot bursts through the bookstore wall and immediately decapitates 2 orcs. Turns out the Techno Iron Man suit is worn by another member of Sumisu's team, a monster girl named Tion. After Sumisu's entire team successfully infiltrates the bookstore, the girl whose melons were initially popped by the orc leader suddenly resurrects from the dead like the Undertaker and takes out 2 other orcs. When one of the remaining orcs grabs her and threatens to squeeze her to death, she pulls out her weapon and shoots herself, and the bullets tear straight through her body and into the orc, dropping him to his knees. The orc stares up at her in total disbelief that she is still alive, so she reveals she is a zombie named Zombina, another member of Sumisu's freak squad. The orc leader, realizing that all his teammates have been unalived by the monster girls, immediately grabs the black-haired chick nearby as a hostage and human shield. However, to his utter shock, the black-haired girl rearranges his messed-up face with her leg and then dramatically transforms into a white-haired monster girl named Doppel, who is also a member of Sumisu's gang. When Manako arrives to complete the squad formation, Sumisu herself walks through the front door to personally finish the orc menace once and for all by blasting his drum belly without a care for the Interspecies Exchange Bill. After successfully rescuing the hostages, Sumisu pays Kurusu and the girls a visit, but she also brings along her squad of baddie freaks to join them for dinner. Later that night, Sumisu dispatches her freak squad to Kasegi's condo to bring in both him and Arachne. However, when they arrive, they find Kasegi already dead, trapped in Arachne's web, while Arachne herself has managed to escape. Back at the house, everyone is concerned because Kurusu still isn't back from grocery shopping. But when they later check the front porch, they find his groceries scattered across the ground, with one of his shoes sitting among the bags, which tells them that he has been kidnapped. Meanwhile, Kurusu wakes to find himself hanging upside down in a dark warehouse like a human piñata. When he wonders why the heck he is there, Arachne reveals herself as his abductor and then cuts him loose from his hanging spot. As Kurusu hits the floor, he starts squirming toward the exit like a worm trying to escape. But just then, a cop wanders into the warehouse to investigate, forcing Arachne to grab Kurusu and shoot up to the ceiling, where she pins them both against the roof with her web. After a short while, the cop gets creeped out by the eerie atmosphere in the warehouse and immediately runs out, so Arachna decides to drop Kurusu from the roof like a sack of potatoes. After Kurusu pulls himself up, he asks Arachna why she isn't with her host family, and Arachna explains that she didn't get along with them. She shares that from the very first moment she was brought to her host family, they had this sour expression on their faces because of how horrifying she looked. So, after suffering rejection from her host family, she ran into Kasegi, who offered to host her instead and invited her back to his apartment. It's a sad tale, but Arachna stomps over Kurusu and firmly states that she isn't looking for anyone's sympathy. She says she is just sick of humans who only accept what they already find comfortable, and just like every other human, she believes Kurusu is only attracted to the part of her that looks human and must be completely disgusted by the spider half underneath. Kurusu listens to her grudges, but then tells her that he actually finds her spider legs hot, which immediately rizzes up Arachna. She starts to act all flirty with him until a sudden bright light shines through the window, and she realizes that they are surrounded by the cops. Arachna immediately assumes that Kurusu was the one who called the police, while all this time he was busy flirting with her to slow her down. When Kurusu hears Sumisu's voice on the megaphone announcing Arachna's crime of abduction and demanding that she surrender, he does the unexpected and tells Arachna that he would be willing to turn himself in to give her enough time to escape. This shocks Arachna because she wasn't expecting such a simp move from Kurusu, but at the same time she finds his cuteness amusing. However, in the end, Arachna surrenders to the cops on her own terms, and Sumisu apologizes for choosing the wrong host family for her and for abandoning her afterward. In response, Arachna tells her she does not need her apology, and what she needs instead is a home remodeled to accommodate her actual size, and a host who is not disgusted by the spider half of her existence, clearly hinting at Kurusu's place. With no choice, Sumisu agrees to her conditions and promises to arrange accommodation that suits her specific needs. Before long, Arachna fully moves into Kurusu's crib and starts living with the rest of the monster girls, but as usual, Mia immediately feels threatened by her presence. When she tries attacking Arachna, she gets bodied and tied up like cattle to the slaughter by Arachna's webs, making her realize that Arachna wouldn't be an easy opponent. So she tries to gang up with the rest of the monster girls, but realizes that Arachna is already 2 steps ahead of her and has already won over all their affections. The only person she hasn't yet won over is Surya, but as Mia tries to ask for help, Surya immediately crushes every last shred of hope she has by stating plainly that she has no objection whatsoever to Arachna living in the house. Surya also admits that, unlike her initial suspicion of Mero, she senses no ill will from Arachna toward her master. Desperately trying to convince her, Mia points out that she can feel Arachna is up to no good based on how monstrous her face looked, but Surya immediately scolds her, advising that it is wrong to judge people based on their ugly appearance. Later that night, Kurusu heads to bed, ready to finally get some sleep, but he lands directly in Arachna's web stretched across his entire bedroom. From the shadows, Arachna reveals herself, and after she barricades the door with webs, she strips and insists they do something freaky that night. However, before she can pull out Kurusu's virgin plot gun, Surya rips the door to pieces with her sword and immediately smashes her way out of the window with Kurusu. As Surya gallops at full speed, Kurusu demands to know where the heck she is taking him, and Surya replies that she is taking him far away from home, where Arachna will not be able to stick her disgusting fangs into his pants. As Surya picks up speed down the street, every passerby within visual range stops and stares, and the attention clearly gets under her skin. However, while Surya reads the crowd's expressions as judgmental, Kurusu tries to point out that everyone is staring because her balloons are doing the Alanzi dance. Still, Surya ignores him as she is deep in thought, realizing that just like the people staring and judging her without knowing her, she had also judged Arachna based on her appearance without really knowing her. Consumed by regret, Surya stops the ride to have a moment of self-reflection, but just then, the psycho and his chopped-faced baby mama from the hotel incident, accompanied by some thugs, approach them and, as usual, start trash-talking Kurusu. When Kurusu tries to handle the gorilla face like he did last time, Surya tells him not to and then pulls out her sword to fight on his behalf. However, she pauses when the ugly jackal reminds her about the law prohibiting monsters from hurting humans. Suddenly, a dude materializes from behind Kurusu and gets him in a chokehold, and before Surya can react, she gets restrained by 2 of the cronies. As the dude tries to manhandle her massive racks, he and his low-life thugs suddenly get trapped in Arachna's spider webs, and just Arachna's presence alone is enough to scare the dude and his lackeys into fainting. When Saria catches her breath and reminds Arachna that what she just did goes against the interspecies exchange bill, Arachna shrugs and points out that the bill only matters if she gets caught harming humans. Saria then thanks her for saving their lives, but Arachna immediately wraps Kurusu in her webs and demands to continue what they started in the bedroom as payment for saving them. However, before she can act on her urges, Saria knocks her to the ground and snatches back her master. In a sudden outburst, Saria says she is grateful to Arachna for saving her life, but she still hates her regardless for always trying to use her master like her plaything. Hearing Saria finally voice her grievances makes Arachna laugh, and she admits that she hates it when people try to pretend nothing is wrong. She explains that she always knew Saria didn't trust her the whole time, but Saria had been acting like she didn't have any objections. Arachna tells Saria that people are free to like and dislike what they want, and it is completely normal if she doesn't like her, but pretending to like her is just pure hypocrisy. After dropping these bombs of wisdom, Arachna announces that she is heading home, and Kurusu agrees to go with her, leaving Saria behind. Touched by Arachna's words, Saria finally realizes how wrong she had been the entire time, so she chases after them and apologizes to Arachna for everything. The next morning, Kurusu comes down with a terrible cold, and the girls are worried about the situation. But Su bursts into the house like the SWAT team and immediately orders all of them to stay away from Kurusu. She explains that, based on his symptoms, she suspects he has contracted the milkman virus, a condition caused by excessive exposure to watermelon plots, and that until further notice, he needs to be fully quarantined. Su insists she is the only one at the moment capable of taking care of Kurusu, but the girls know the lazy Dumbo is just looking for an excuse to skip work, and to prove them right, 10 minutes later, Su is already zoned out in Slumberland. With no choice, Mia suggests they have to take care of Kurusu themselves, but Saria reminds her of the virus that Su claims might be infectious. After thinking of a way around it, they all agree that Shu is the only person who can get close to Kurusu without getting infected, since she is nothing but an endowed slime. So, using Shu's ability to read minds, the girls pass their individual messages to Kurusu, and after that, they decide to teach Shu how to properly take care of a man. They spend hours teaching Shu their individual methods they believe should be able to cure Kurusu of his illness, but after they all fail miserably, Shu decides to ditch their worthless ideas and take matters into her own hands. After attaching her tentacles to Kurusu's thick dome to read his brain, she discovers that the cherry boy is not suffering from any virus whatsoever, but instead, he has body pains, dehydration, and a dry throat, so she addresses all three issues with her slimy cannonballs. When Kurusu wakes later that night, he realizes he is feeling much better and that Shu is responsible, so he thanks her. When the rest of the girls burst into the room to check on him, he tells them about the miracle Shu just pulled off, and they are all surprised that the slime girl they usually treat like a mascot with a rabbit's brain just outperformed every single one of them. Several days later, Su and Kurusu go on a pretend date to a maid cafe, but the monster girls, thinking it's a real date, nearly blow a fuse from jealousy, so they trail them to the cafe to figure out what Su and Kurusu are talking about. Deciding that one of them should sneak in with a disguise, Saria suggests Shu, since she can transform into practically anything, and everyone agrees until they peek through the window and discover that Mei-ro is already inside, disguised as one of the maids. Inside, Kurusu suspects the pink-haired maid must be Mei-ro, but Su dismisses the idea, pointing out that Mei-ro has a fishtail instead of legs and couldn't possibly be standing upright. While disguised, Mei-ro manages to eavesdrop on Su and Kurusu's conversation and realizes they are indeed on a date. Suddenly, Shu, who is helping Mei-ro with her disguise by transforming into the maid costume, hits her hydration limit and begins sucking water from Mei-ro's floodgate pores, which pushes Mei-ro into a state of intense excitement that escalates into a public climax. Meanwhile, Su and Kurusu leave the cafe, and as they wander around, looking for more exciting places to visit, Kurusu spots someone who looks like Papy, but Su, as usual, dismisses his concern, claiming it's just someone in a terrible bird costume. When they enter a game house, Papy, disguised with Shu's help, sneaks in behind them and finds a surveillance spot to monitor the situation. While spying, her phone accidentally slips inside her coochie, and as she desperately tries to retrieve it, she starts massaging herself in a seductive way, attracting all the gooners nearby, who begin recording material for their nightly sausage massage sessions. The commotion drives Sumi-Su and Kuru-Su away to a quieter spot, so they end up at a park where they spot an ice cream stand. Kuru-Su goes to buy ice cream for them, but immediately notices two gigantic things which he instantly recognizes, but with how good their disguises is, Kuru-Su is unable to tell that the owners of those fun bags are none other than Surya and Mia. With shoe wrapping around their bodies, the girls perfectly pull off the ice cream stand disguise, but somehow, the sheer size of their honkers draws all the local degenerate simps who flock to buy ice cream from them. Pissed off that she can't have a quiet date, Sumi-Su drags Kuru-Su away to another spot, but Mia is already trailing them. When she arrives, she suddenly spots Arachna there as well, who explains that she needs to gather evidence of Kuru-Su and Sumi-Su doing bed cardio to use as blackmail. Mia refuses to allow the blackmail operation, and the two of them start fighting, only to get caught red-handed by Sumi-Su and her gang of freaks. With their spy mission fully exposed, Sumi-Su assembles the monster girls and reveals the real reason behind the so-called date. It turns out that several days ago, Kuru-Su received an anonymous letter from an unknown sender, threatening to unalive him if he tried to marry any of the monster girls. Sumi-Su explains that the pretend date was designed specifically to flush out the sender by creating a scenario that would provoke them into acting. Since the plan has now failed spectacularly, Sumi-Su announces a revised strategy. Kuru-Su will go on individual dates with each monster girl, one by one, creating multiple opportunities to draw out whoever sent the threatening letter. On the first individual date, Kuru-Su goes out with Mia, but Mero decides to tag along, which immediately annoys Mia, since her plan was to have Kuru-Su all to herself. However, when Mero quietly reminds her that she has zero interest in being the main chick and is perfectly fine playing the side chick, Mia calms down, and the three of them head to the aquarium together. Upon arriving, they're met with a presidential welcome, which shocks both Mia and Kuru-Su, but they soon realize the special treatment is all thanks to Mero, who happens to be one of the aquarium's top clients. As they move through the exhibits, watching sea turtles and other aquatic creatures go about their business, Kuru-Su and Mia drift in front of a tank and spot two freaky fish locking lips, which gets them in the mood, so they lean in to exchange a little mouth bacteria. Just as their lips are about to touch, Mero suddenly appears, yapping about the ridiculous history of fish, which drives Mia mad. After the exhibit, they catch the dolphin performance, where Mero steals the show entirely with her impressive mermaid skills, leaving both Kuru-Su and Mia stunned. Feeling jealous seeing how Kuru-Su is fixated on Mero, Mia storms out of the aquarium. On her way, she bumps into a non-human with lizard traits, who immediately rizzes her up with a cheesy Discord pickup line and suggests they go somewhere warmer. Foolishly, Mia agrees, and they end up in a small boat on the park river. Once they're alone, the lizard reveals his true intentions, pinning Mia down and attempting something naughty. Just as things get dangerous, Kuru-Su bursts out of the water like Aquaman riding a duck speedboat, charging straight at their vessel. The boats collide, and after Kuru-Su saves Mia from the creep, he gives her his shirt to wear since she is all cold, but the crazy lizard man strolls out of the water wanting to get revenge. Pissed off with his annoying face, Mia hurls a stone at him, sending him sprawling. Feeling sorry for the loser, Kuru-Su tries to help him up, but that's when he realizes that the idiot is just another Kylie Jenner in disguise. Mia suspects the obsessed freak might be responsible for sending Kuru-Su the threatening letter, but when she questions him, she realizes that the lizard girl has no idea what she is talking about. After the crackhead flies away in shame, Mia finds a box inside Kuru-Su's shirt pocket, which Kuru-Su explains is a gift he bought for her. Inside the box is a beautiful ice necklace, and as he wears it on her, Mia, surprised, wraps herself around him like a pole in excitement. Later that day, the lizard girl is apprehended by Sumi-Su and her gang for wandering without her host family. Despite the arrest, Sumi-Su can't shake the nagging thought of who sent the threatening letter to Kuru-Su. The following week, Kuru-Su goes on a date with Zombina in the forest with the intention of having a nice time, but Papy and Shu's presence makes it totally impossible. Even Zombina is eating like a glutton, which only adds to Kuru-Su's misery, and when he confronts her about it, Zombina argues that she can't help her appetite since the meat is so good. However, while she is ravaging the meat like a hyena, she suddenly remembers that the forest used to be a dumping site for industrial waste, so she jokingly teases Kuru-Su about possibly contracting some infectious virus while he's out there. Suddenly, they hear a massive roar from deep in the forest, and before their eyes, a monstrous tree creature appears and immediately attacks them. While trying to escape, the tree monster traps both Papy and Kuru-Su with its branches. While Zombina manages to escape, But Shu gets sent flying into a tank filled with powerful industrial waste chemicals. With Papy and Kurusu trapped, the tree monster opens up to reveal a dryad named Ki, who claims to be the protector of the forest and strongly declares her hatred for humans. When she begins torturing Kurusu, Papy screams for Ki to stop, and that's when she suddenly remembers that she had met Ki sometime in the past. Years ago, while casually causing a nuisance as always, Papy stumbled upon an accident scene where she found a little dryad girl as the only survivor. Trying to help, she took the little dryad to the forest and then promptly forgot about her there. Apparently, the little Ki somehow got exposed to the industrial waste in the forest, which transformed her into the giant monster she is now. Although Ki still sees Papy as a friend, she hates humans for destroying the forest by dumping waste into it. When Papy tries to save Kurusu from Ki's torture, Ki smacks her like a fly, sending her flying backward. Seeing how strong Ki is, Papy tries to reason with her and appeal to her cold heart, but Ki is unable to listen since the waste has clearly messed up her brain, so she smacks Papy again. Luckily, Papy lands on something soft and bouncy, but she soon realizes it isn't a bouncy castle at all and it's Shu's giant form. Shu had absorbed the industrial waste, which transformed her into a giant, and with her help, Kurusu is freed from Ki's grip. With both Papy and Kurusu rest on Shu's heavenly blue pillows, Shu deduces that the only way to return Ki to normal is to extract the industrial waste from her body. To do that, Shu launches Papy straight toward Ki's voluptuous mumbo-jumbos, and Papy immediately tries to drain the contaminated nutrients by sucking the tip. When she gets trapped while doing this and is unable to reach the tip of Ki's milk bag, Shu finds a way to restrain Ki, and then sends our cherry boy to become a milkman. Summoning all his courage and trying to control his trouser snake, Kurusu managed to get the work done, and while he does it, Ki retaliates by sending her sucking branches to Shu's blue floaties to also suck out the waste in hers too. This freaky scene leads to a massive explosion that nearly ends the show, but it manages to return Ki and Shu back to their miniature, normal selves. Moments later, Sumisu arrives to arrest Ki for causing such a natural disaster, but after Kurusu explains that Ki isn't at fault and was only messed up by the industrial waste in her brain, Sumisu decides to let Ki go free to continue living in the forest. However, she promises to arrange for the waste to be cleaned up and to allow Papy, her friend, to visit her whenever she likes. Days later, after the horrific forest event, Kurusu goes on a date with Saria. Unfortunately, her massive rump makes it impossible for her to enter most places of interest and even causes a few public disasters along the way, so they eventually settle on having their date in a quiet forest instead. There, Saria presents a lunchbox filled with delicacies she prepared herself for the occasion. However, when Kurusu takes a bite, his soul nearly leaves his body, and he complains that it tastes even worse than your mom's cooking. Feeling terrible, Saria excuses herself to reflect on her miserable cooking skills. While spiraling in self-doubt, she bumps into a menace named Lilith, who she confides in about her inability to satisfy her master. But Lilith decides to play the devil's advocate by promising to help her, before promptly hypnotizing her. A few minutes later, Kurusu, while searching for Saria, finds her deep in the forest, but before he can say a word, Saria suddenly jumps onto his waist and starts seducing him with her assets. Kurusu freaks out and tries to calm her down, but his resistance only makes Saria push even harder. Meanwhile, Lilith, watching the scene unfold, is delighted with the results of her handiwork. However, her excitement is cut short when she suddenly gets attacked by a raging boar. Kurusu hears her scream for help and immediately tries to assist, but this only makes the boar lock eyes with him and charge straight at him. Eventually, Saria regains her senses and manages to subdue the boar, and afterwards, in tears, she expresses her deepest desire to always satisfy her master. Admitting that at this moment she feels completely useless. To console her, Kurusu climbs onto her back and asks her for a ride home. Saria is shocked by his reaction, but Kurusu hugs her from behind and assures her that she is important to him because he will always need her help. At the same time, Arachna, who has been observing the entire scene, captures Lilith in her webs and decides to make use of the little menace's abilities to her advantage. Days later, at a coffee shop downtown, Kurusu is invited by One-Eye Manako, Tian, and Zombina, who inform him of their intention to get involved in the ongoing rotation dating. They also give him another threatening letter left by the anonymous murderer. After reading the letter, Kurusu realizes that instead of the usual death threat, it reads more like a love letter written by the devil. Putting that aside, Kurusu demands to know why Sumisu's freak squad wants to go on a date with him, and even though Zombina claims it's because they're bored. The truth is they're jealous of the other monster girls and also want to experience what a date looks like. Curious, Kurusu asks why Doppel isn't among them, and Monaco explains that it's simply because Doppel isn't a simp like the rest of them. Eventually, Kurusu agrees to go on a date with the Freak Squad, and the first person he goes with is Tian. During the date, she takes him to a Gucci store where she plans to buy a cute outfit for herself. However, when she enters the changing room, her massive backside makes it difficult for her to take off her skirt, so she asks Kurusu to help her with it. When Kurusu tries to assist, he accidentally fumbles her panties and gets an unexpected view of her pepperoni. After finally helping her remove the skirt, Kurusu overhears Tian crying inside the dressing room. He assumes it must be because he saw her plots in 4K, so he apologizes, but Tian admits she's actually upset because her skirt got torn. To console her, Kurusu offers to help fix it, and Tian immediately lights up with excitement and then enthusiastically pounds his head with her airbags. The next day, Kurusu goes on a date with Zombina, and after they watch a zombie movie, they stroll down the street searching for an exciting place to visit next. Unfortunately, Zombina's hand suddenly separates from her body, so Kurusu offers to help her sew it back on. While he does this, Zombina shyly asks if he isn't disgusted, and Kurusu admits that even though a real corpse might be too much for him, he is perfectly fine helping her out. His sweet words touch Zombina but also ignite her mischievous side, so she decides to tease him a little. She intentionally rips off one of her melons, and Kurusu, thinking it's something else, picks it up for her, only to freak out when he realizes what it actually is. Zombina then asks him to help stitch it back, and while Kurusu does so, she is deeply moved by the fact that her monster side doesn't creep him out. Next, Kurusu goes on a date with Manako, and during the date, he notices that Manako is the shy type because she keeps her distance from him. He later learns that the reason for this is that she only has one eye, which means her depth perception is practically non-existent. Manako then shyly suggests they go somewhere private to avoid bumping into crowds, so they find a secluded spot to sit. There, Manako begins to doubt Kurusu's true intentions because of how nice he is to her and the other monster girls, and she suspects he might just be pretending. To test her theory, she decides to use one of her high-grade survival skills, which involves maintaining eye contact, and if the other person looks away after a few seconds, it proves they are suspicious. However, when she asks Kurusu to look at her, he stares so intensely that it feels like he's searching straight into her soul. The intensity ends up creeping her out, and she eventually asks him to stop staring. Meanwhile, behind a nearby vending machine, a cloaked figure secretly spies on them, and the moment Manako spots the mysterious figure with her big eye, the stranger immediately takes off running. Out of nowhere, Zombina appears and starts firing at the spy, and at the same time, Tian shows up, tossing the vending machine to block the spy's escape route. Seizing the moment, Manako finally takes the spy down with a sleeping dagger, and when they finally approach to reveal the spy's identity, they discover that it is none other than Doppel. After a while, Doppel finally comes clean, confessing that she and Sumisu had been responsible for sending the mysterious death threat letters to Kurusu. The reason, she claims, is that Kurusu is too much of a virgin to make a decision about which monster girl he wants to marry, so they had to push him to hurry up. As the girls head home, they talk about their individual dates and how much Kurusu's affectionate care for them truly touched them more deeply than they expected. The fact that he didn't see them as monster girls, but simply as ordinary girls, is what really meant the most to them. Later that night, while heading home, Manako brings up the issue of the second threat letter, noting how much it reads more like a poem than a real threat, but Doppel has absolutely no idea about a second letter. At the same time, while the girls discuss this, Kurusu is suddenly attacked by a mysterious ghost girl. That night at home, Kurusu returns with the same headless ghost who had attacked him, leaving the girls creeped out. When Seria finally summons the courage to ask who the headless girl is, Kurusu explains how he was attacked by her and mentions that after the attack, the ghost somehow misplaced her head, so he brought her back to the house. When Kurusu says he plans to go search for the ghost's head, the girls, worried for his safety, volunteer to join him. Their search leads them to a cemetery, where they split up to cover more ground, and while searching on his own, Kurusu eventually finds the missing ghost head. The ominous presence surrounding it makes him wonder if the head is alive, and when he nervously tries to pick it up, the head comes to life and introduces herself as a Dullahan, protector of souls and reaper of death. She thanks him for taking care of her body and then permits him to carry her head back to her body. When Kurusu and the girls finally get home late that night, Kurusu fixes the head, but he's shocked when the Dullahan announces that someone in the house is on the verge of death, and then points directly at him. She explains that this is why he has constantly been on the verge of death, and threatens that, as the horseman of the underworld, she will surely harvest his soul. Before she can act, Arachna binds her with webs, and then declares that no one is taking away her meat provider. To protect Kuru-Su from the Grim Reaper, the rest of the girls spring into action. Papy snatches Kuru-Su like a rag doll and takes to the sky, but in her desperation, she crashes into a signpost, and Kuru-Su nearly meets his end. But Shu arrives just in time to cushion his fall. With Papy injured and out of the race, Saria declares her determination to carry her master to the ends of the world, away from death itself. As Saria gallops with Kuru-Su clinging to her like a scared little wimp, she fantasizes about a peaceful life together, just the two of them, but her daydream shatters when Kuru-Su falls from her back and crashes to the ground. As she goes back for him, Dullahan suddenly pops out from nowhere, and reminds her that she cannot run away from the Ghost Rider. However, Saria still insists they can escape, so she tosses Kuru-Su into the ocean, where Mero continues the escape mission. Upon arriving on land, Mero goes dark and wants to have Kuru-Su all to herself, so she pins him to the ground, insisting that she wants his seedlings in her. She loses her mind, and while forcing herself on Kuru-Su, she nearly drowns him, but luckily Mia arrives just in time to choke her back to sanity, and then pull Kuru-Su out of the water. After dragging him to the pavement, Mia desperately tries to shake the water out from his lungs, but Arachna shows up and binds her with her web. Dullahan also appears with her, intending to clarify what she means when she says Kuru-Su is going to die, but before she can, Kuru-Su finally regains consciousness and announces that if he makes it home, he is getting married immediately. Together, they all head back home that night, where Dullahan clarifies that she is not a death god. Su-Me-Su, who also happens to be in the house, then finally makes everything clear when she mentions that Dullahan is nothing but a scam rogue monster girl who escaped from her family's host. Weeks later, Kuru-Su is neck-deep in debt, as housing all the monster girls is only leading him down the road to becoming an eternal broke man. His food budget is ruined, and realizing they might starve, he heads to the fridge to see what's left, only to be shocked to find it empty. Thinking of what to do next, Kuru-Su remembers that there should be an open sale at the supermarket that day. However, as he rushes there to buy the little he can, his hope is crushed by a notice sign announcing that they would be closed for a week. As a last resort, Kuru-Su and the girls head to the open market to haggle over food prices. When they get there, the monster girls become instant celebrities, as most of the shop owners fall in love with them and start gifting them free food. However, considering how much the monster girls consume, Kuru-Su figures the food might not last them a week. So, together with Shu, they head to the forest to meet Ki, and ask for permission to gather some grown leaves and food. At first, Ki is reluctant to let them take anything from the forest, but after Shu traps her in her slime and gives her the best ecstasy she has ever had, her heart softens, and she agrees to let them pluck whatever they need. Hours later, after gathering all the food and fruits they can, Kuru-Su and Shu head back home with their produce. On the way, Kuru-Su is attacked by the lizard girl, who comes seeking revenge. However, Shu overpowers her with her slime poison and leaves her violated. When they get home that night, Kuru-Su and the girls celebrate their food hunting success by preparing a dinner fit for a king. Just as they are about to dig in, Su-Me-Su and her gang of freaks show up, wanting to join the feast. After dinner, Kuru-Su becomes depressed again, realizing they've eaten most of the food they gathered. When Su-Me-Su notices the worried look on his face and asks about it, Shu jumps in to explain the terrible food situation in the house. However, Su-Me-Su shocks them both by revealing that there had always been an option for hosts housing monster girls to request a food budget from the government, making Kuru-Su realize he just hustled for food for nothing. If you enjoy anime recaps like this, subscribe to the channel and watch this next video.